Hello and welcome to The World Today, everyone. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says both the U.S. and Iran have the willingness to resume negotiations, and the international community should encourage them to return to the negotiating table. The comment came as Wang Yi had a phone conversation with the Canadian Foreign Minister Nta. Wang elaborated on China's principled position, saying the Iranian nuclear issue should be resolved through dialogue and should not be a reason for the use of force. Wang also said China and Canada can jointly play a constructive role in this regard. Anand briefed Wang on Canada's position regarding the Middle East situation, saying Canada stands ready to work with China to push for a ceasefire and promote regional peace and stability. The two sides also exchanged views on China-Canada relations. Tehran has reportedly sent its official response to a 15-point agreement proposed by the U.S. to end the conflict. Tasneem's news agency says Iran's response was formally issued through intermediaries on Wednesday. Iran has also presented its conditions and is waiting for a response from Washington. Indirect talks between the two sides are reportedly taking place, with messages being relayed by Pakistan. U.S. President Donald Trump has extended a pause on planned strikes on Iranian energy facilities for 10 more days, claiming talks are going very well. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reports the Pentagon is considering sending 10,000 more troops to the Middle East. Ehsan Kiavani has more from the Iranian city of Yazd.
A Tasneem news agency close to the IRGC has quoted an informed source that Iran has stated that the enemy's aggression and terrorism must come to an end. Concrete conditions must be established to ensure that war will not be repeated. War reparations and compensation must be guaranteed and clearly stipulated, and the cessation of hostilities must take effect across all fronts and for all resistance groups that participated in this battle through the region, including Hezbollah in Lebanon. Regarding the latest invasions, in an early morning airstrike Thursday, two residential areas in the central city of Isfahan were hit, destroying several units and damaging others. State media said the injured were hospitalized, but no casualty figures are available for now. In the northeastern city of Mashhad, state media reported a projectile explosion near the airport Wednesday evening. This is the first airstrike on the city in the current war, although Mashhad was hit a few times during last June's 12-day war. Foreign media reported the killing of the IRGC naval commander Alireza Tangistiri in the southern port city of Bandar Abbas, but Iranian official media have not confirmed this. Meanwhile, official reports said 3 were killed and 7 were injured in an attack on a residential building in Bandar Abbas, so it is unclear if these two incidents are connected. According to Iran's Red Crescent Society, the death toll over nearly 4 weeks of war in Iran has exceeded 1,900, including over 200 children.
A new wave of Iranian missiles has targeted central Israel. One man was killed by shrapnel in a missile strike in Nahariya in the north, following a barrage from Lebanon on Thursday. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed during combat operations in southern Lebanon, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is expanding its buffer zone. Jonathan Regev reports from Tel Aviv.
It was another day of many sirens throughout Israel, here in central Israel where I am, and in other places throughout the country. It doesn't mean that Iran is sending a lot of missiles into Israel. 1 or 2 missiles at a time are enough to create the sirens and send millions of people to the shelters, to the protected rooms, time and time again. This is what happened today with various sirens throughout the country. Why today? Why there were so many launches today? Possibly the weather. It is overcast here in Israel and overcast in Iran as well, and this may be preventing the Israeli drones that are flying over Iranian airspace at all time to try and locate those missiles before they are fired. This is what happened in previous days, not so much today, and that is why Iran was able to launch that number of missiles. Again, not so many missiles, but in smaller barrages, and each barrage sending people to the shelters. At the same time, the Israeli strikes on Iran are constantly ongoing, as Israel is a bit confused regarding the developments. Are there negotiations? Are there no negotiations? Will the war end soon? No one really knows. On the Lebanese front, Israel sent another division into Lebanon to create a bigger buffer zone between Lebanon and the Israeli community. Basically, Israel now controlling a strip within Lebanon. Israel is able to prevent the infiltration of Hezbollah militants closer to its communities, but is completely unable for the moment to prevent rocket and missile fire into Lebanon. A man was killed on Thursday in the northern city of Nahariya from a rocket from Lebanon. This after a woman was killed on Wednesday. So yes, Israel is able to create that buffer zone, but for the moment unable to stop the rockets and the missiles from Hezbollah hitting the northern communities. Jonathan Regev, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
Before announcing the 10-day pause in attacks on Iranian energy plants, President Trump had threatened to increase pressure on Iran if it did not make a deal. The conflict has massively disrupted shipping, sending crude oil prices up nearly 40%. Nitrogen-based fertilizers critical to food production have jumped nearly 50% in price. Owen Fairclough has more from Washington.
Anyone looking for clarity about exactly where the United States and Iran stand right now on a potential resolution of their conflict might have struggled watching Donald Trump's first cabinet meeting since the conflict began. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who's been central to all of this, said that Iran has rebuffed any U.S. attempts at negotiations, only for Trump to say that Iran is desperate for some kind of deal. Of course, with the conflict moving so quickly, it's perfectly possible to have multiple narratives. Nevertheless, we have had clarity that Iran has confirmed receipt of the US's 15-point plan with various conditions for some kind of resolution. And Trump himself zoned in on one of the thorniest problems. Here's the US president.
They now have the chance, that is Iran, to permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions and to chart a new path forward. We'll see if they want to do it. If they don't, we're their worst nightmare.
Trump was referring there to the central problem in all of this, the long-standing contention by Iran that it's enriching uranium for civilian or peaceful purposes, and the long-standing counter by the US that Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapons, the backstory to this conflict and indeed tensions in the region. And yet Trump later said he's extending his deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz, that vital waterway, until April the 6th, under threat of bombing Iran's energy infrastructure. He also appeared to claim that Iran was offering some kind of sweetener to a deal by allowing around 10 commercial vessels to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, per Iran's previous threats to fire on commercial traffic passing through that area. But Trump also refused to rule out potentially seizing Iran's crude oil, its most valuable export, comparing that to the seizure of Venezuela's exports following the forcible seizure of President Nicolas Maduro. All of this as the United Nations warned this Thursday that should this conflict continue for between 3 and 6 months, it will imperil global food security, with oil prices shooting up, fertilizer supplies also choked in the Strait of Hormuz, all of this having a big impact on food production. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Sudan's fragile healthcare system is facing a new threat. Aid groups warn that life-saving medical supplies could run out within weeks as the Middle East's conflict disrupts global supply routes. And as CGTN's Sharon Baranga reports, children and vulnerable patients are among those most at risk.
Clinics across Sudan could run out of medical supplies within 2 weeks, according to Save the Children. Shipments of essential medicines have been disrupted following airspace closures in the Middle East and halted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Save the Children says around 90 government-run clinics serving nearly 400,000 people depend on these supplies, with no alternative sources inside the country.
But for Sudan, the impact is delayed in the replenishment of our medical supplies, in the incoming of our nutritional supplies, and this provides an increased pressure on the current stocks we have. And if we don't act fast, these stocks will run out. There's a risk of service interruption at supported health facilities. However, we are trying and actively to look at this in engaging with logistics partners. We're expediting clearance. We're rerouting some of our goods. For example, from the UAE, we're rerouting by trucks to Jeddah. We're coming then from Jeddah by sea to bring it into Port Sudan. We're prioritizing allocation of the available stocks within the high-risk locations. We're looking at other organizations on ground, if they have any stocks we can take and to continue health facilities running, adjusting distribution plans. However, the core issue remains Sudan's response is operating on the margins and on very thin margins. And external shocks like this have a very huge impact on it.
About $600,000 worth of medicines are currently stranded in ports in Dubai. These include antibiotics, anti-malarial drugs, and pediatric treatments, all critical in a country already struggling with limited healthcare access amidst its own civil war. Rising global transport costs and rerouted shipping are also delaying deliveries by weeks.
The state of hospitals is deplorable. Hospitals were already struggling before the war, operating at only 60% of their capacity, and the war has only worsened the situation. While healthcare workers are generally making great efforts, hospitals are in desperate need of rehabilitation. They need to address a shortage of medical supplies and training and development for their staff.
Children are among the hardest hit. Doctors warn that critical treatments and vaccinations are no longer available, putting thousands of young lives at risk.
Premature babies need vaccinations but are also unavailable due to the war in Iran because there is no way to deliver them to Sudan. There are children with special needs and others who require special medical care that is currently unavailable because of the war, and they are now at risk of losing their lives.
Aid organizations on the ground are working to deliver what supplies they can, but time is running out. The United Nations warns the Middle East conflict is placing humanitarian supply systems under severe strain, with Sudan among the countries most at risk. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Well, that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching. Chinese Vice President Zheng meets with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on cooperation and relations. At least 28 killed and dozens injured in drone attacks in central and western Sudan. And the WTO Chief calls for trade overhaul to meet new world order. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business, the World Bank pledges aid for developing countries facing an economic fallout from the Middle East conflict. And in sports, transgender athletes banned from women's events at future Olympics Games. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with our top story and to Sudan now, where at least 28 people have been killed and 29 others injured in two separate drone attacks. On Wednesday, two cities in central and western Sudan were targeted, according to medical sources and witnesses. The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces is accusing the Sudanese armed forces of carrying out the airstrike. The army has yet to comment on the allegations. In a separate incident in the city of Al-Rahad in North Kordofan state, witnesses say 6 people were killed and 12 others injured in a drone strike targeting a civilian passenger vehicle that was heading to the city of Rawaba. According to UN statistics released Tuesday, more than 500 civilians had been killed in drone strikes in Sudan this year as of March the 15th, most of them in the Kordofan region. The UN has warned that the growing use of these weapons is exacerbating civilian casualties. The two sides have been at war since April 2023. The conflict has killed tens of thousands of people and displaced millions inside Sudan and across the region. And humanitarian groups in Sudan's Darfur region have ramped up aid services after a drone strike hit a major hospital last week. The RSF has blamed the army for the strike that rendered the hospital non-functional, but the army has denied the claims. Caroline B. now reports on the continued fighting between the two warring parties.
The drone strike killed at least 70 people and injured at least 89 others, destroying Al-Din Teaching Hospital, which had served people across East Darfur state. It is the latest hit on a healthcare facility in the almost 3-year conflict, and aid agencies are responding.
Our humanitarian colleagues in Sudan tell us that we have ramped up health services in Al-Dain, the capital of East Darfur, following the deadly drone attack on the teaching hospital there last Friday. We, along with our partners, especially Sudanese health workers, have scaled up services in surrounding facilities to meet the urgent needs of primary health care, nutrition, pediatric, and maternal health services, as well as the delivery of critical medical supplies.
The army has denied targeting the medical facility, which is in an area controlled by the RSF. The World Health Organization has verified more than 200 attacks on health facilities in the country, resulting in more than 2,000 deaths since the start of the conflict in April 2023. Meanwhile, fresh and intense attacks continue, particularly in East Darfur, Kordofan and bordering areas, causing high civilian casualties and disrupting essential services.
Across the Kordofan region, repeated drone attacks and airstrikes are disrupting key transport corridors, including the supply routes to El Obeid, Dilling and Kadugli, which is having an immediate knock-on impact on our humanitarian activities. In North Kordofan, reports indicate at least 6 people were killed yesterday when a drone struck a commercial truck in Al-Rahad. Last week, the same town saw strikes that destroyed a health clinic, also killing civilians. In Blue Nile states, local sources report heavy airstrikes in Kormuk. That took place on Tuesday. Health facilities in the town have reportedly been looted and destroyed.
The UN has once again called for the cessation of hostilities, urging parties to abide by international humanitarian law, which protects medical facilities and personnel and prohibits attacks against civilians and civilian structures. Caroline B., CGTN.
At least 20 people have died in landslides caused by heavy rain in southern Tanzania. The landslides destroyed houses early Wednesday in the Mbeya region, according to the administrator for Rungwe district, where the disaster occurred. The death toll is expected to rise. 18 bodies were found on Wednesday and 2 more on Thursday. One of the victims was a 1.5-year-old child. Authorities have urged residents in landslide-prone areas to evacuate. Tanzania's meteorological services also are forecasting a heavy rain across the country up until Tuesday. And to Djibouti, where at least 9 migrants have died after a boat capsized off the coast of the East African country, with 45 others still missing. The International Organization for Migration said the vessel had been carrying 320 passengers on board. It is working with local authorities in search and rescue operations. The incident is among several deadly accidents reported along Djibouti's Red Sea coastline. Migrants frequent the route with hopes of reaching the Arabian Peninsula via Yemen. Over 4,000 migrants died or have gone missing in 2025 after their boats capsized on their way to Europe. The migrants, mostly from West and North Africa, use boats to gain entry into Europe in search of greener pastures. There are 3 main African migratory routes: the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and the Eastern routes. And according to the International Organization for Migration, over 600 have already died in the first 2 months of 2026. CGTN's Caroline B. reports.
Data from the UN's Migration Agency indicates that the Mediterranean Sea crossing from Africa to Europe claimed at least 2,108 lives in 2025. Another 1,047 died or vanished within the same period, attempting to reach Spain's Canary Islands via the Atlantic route. In August 2025, a migrant boat departing from the Gambia capsized, leaving 70 people dead. Then in October, multiple accidents were recorded along the central Mediterranean route. A boat sank off the coast of Tunisia near Madia, killing at least 40 people, including children, while another vessel capsized off the Saman coast of Libya, with 18 killed and 64 rescued. Then in November, a shipwreck off Zuwara in Libya left 42 migrants missing and presumed dead. December saw the crisis intensify, with a boat from West Africa capsizing off Morocco, killing 69, including 25 Malians. Another vessel capsized off Mauritania, leaving over 100 dead. And near Joal in Senegal, a boat capsized with 12 bodies recovered. On December 31st, a migrant boat from the Gambia carrying about 230 passengers capsized in Jinak near Senegal. 10 deaths were confirmed, while 118 people were rescued. Moving into 2026, in February, 53 migrants from West Africa lost their lives after their boat carrying 55 people capsized north of Zuwara in Libya. Only 2 Nigerian women survived. And last week, 18 people died in similar fashion in Comoros, mainly of Congolese descent. And finally, the latest boat accident in Djibouti that left 9 people dead and 45 missing has added to this deadly trend. Major causes for the accident are attributed to overcrowding and harsh weather conditions. Meanwhile, most of these deaths go unreported. Caroline B., CGTN.
The European Parliament is set to vote on tougher migration rules that could see irregular migrants deported to return hubs outside the European Union. The proposed reforms would introduce stricter penalties for those who refuse to leave, including detention and entry bans, as part of broader efforts to curb migration across the bloc. Supporters say the hubs could act as a deterrent. However, rights groups, including the International Rescue Committee, warn the centers risk becoming legal black holes where protections may not be guaranteed. Some member states have also questioned their effectiveness. If approved, the vote would pave the way for negotiations on a final framework highlighting deep divisions within Europe over how to manage migration. The head of the World Trade Organization has urged countries to look into the future and consider how to reform global trade, saying the multilateral system had fundamentally changed. While addressing the opening ceremony of the WTO's 14th Ministerial Conference in Yaoundé, Cameroon, Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said the world trading system was facing significant uncertainty due to the Middle East conflict and the impact of U.S. tariffs. She said the WTO was facing a set of problems, including paralysis of the organization's dispute settlement body and transparency in notifying the use of subsidies. Ahead of this session, some diplomats and trade officials had warned that without an agreement on reforms, countries could exit the rules-based global trade system and set their own regulations. At the meeting, Turkey's trade minister supported a WTO agreement aimed at boosting investment in developing countries. Ankara had previously opposed the agreement.
Three things are clear. First, the world order and the multilateral system we used to know has irrevocably changed. Second, we will not get it back. And third, we must look to the future. That means figuring out what worked well in the old order so we can keep it and build on it. It means figuring out what did not work well so we can repair it. And it also means identifying the gaps in the renewed order we are shaping so we can close them.
Turkey is one of the biggest trading partners and investors in Africa and a true ally of the continent. Therefore, Turkey, while maintaining its concerns and reservations, will not impede the incorporation of the agreement into the WTO. I declare that Turkey hereby lifts its objection to the current decision on incorporation of investment facilitation for development.
Women play a crucial role in Africa's economic development, albeit unrecognized for decades. In Cameroon, at least 70% and some estimates say as high as 90% of the working population is in the informal sector. And it is women who carry out most of the essential work in the fields of trade and commerce. The WTO is campaigning for women to now be included in significant roles in international trade and says they must be equipped with tools to understand the role they play in the global economy. Beryl Ororo has that report.
Brenda Lanteng is one of the millions of Cameroonian women who have decided to venture into the informal trade. She recently started producing traditional shoes and accessories using bamboo threads, which she sells at the market in Yaoundé.
Society has treated women like second-class citizens for far too long. Take me, for example. I do the marketing for my dad, and I'm not just doing it nationally, but internationally. If I can do it and I'm still young, that means anyone else can do it too. We shouldn't just limit ourselves to the idea that a woman belongs in the home or is a housewife, but look beyond that.
Brenda and her father weave slippers and other accessories. While she has managed to establish herself in the local market, she's still struggling to make headway in the international market.
The main obstacle preventing me from selling internationally is the export process. It's true that we can ship goods via travel agencies or by air, but it's very expensive. Even using DHL isn't an option. To send the last order I received, I traveled from my home in Bastos to the airport using a passenger service because we wanted a slightly lower price. We really couldn't use DHL, so that's our only obstacle.
Customs duties are high in most countries, so many local businesses are using the emergence of social media as a platform to market their products on the international market at a fraction of the cost.
Long before Westerners arrived, my business was pretty much limited to Westerners. In short, the travelers who came to Cameroon, you see. But with social media, we're already selling to other countries every month. We've had orders from Gabon, France, and even Cote d'Ivoire. So we are already operating internationally.
Women play a key role in international trade as drivers of growth in the service, manufacturing and agriculture sector. However, women face higher hurdles in accessing finance, infiltrating trade networks and employing digital tools. At local markets like this one in Yaoundé, support is trickling and women are doing their part to bridge the gap.
Women already know that they are playing a very, very important role in trade. Most women might be in the informal sector as small fisher folks, cross-border traders, as small-scale farmers, as market women. But we have seen also women who are now in big businesses, in textiles, they are exporting. So women are really moving up the ladder. There are a number of initiatives which are helping women on the Africa continent to help them to trade more. For example, across borders. Women under the Continental Free Trade Area, there is a program to work on cross-border women to trade under simplified trade regimes.
At the global level, the World Trade Organization is actively working to increase women's participation in global trade through its informal working group on trade and gender, established in 2020 by over 120 members. Through its platform, it aims to make trade inclusive and encourage women to aspire to decision-making positions in various fields, ultimately reshaping the nature of business for global growth and good. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
As the WTO conference continues in Cameroon, entrepreneurs in the country are striving to increase their exports to China under its zero tariff policy. Traders say the new Chinese policy presents a chance to diversify exports and produce high value-added manufactured goods. CGTN's Caroline B. with that report.
Bakoa Louise Yolande has been doing international trade for 10 years, importing a range of products from China. And as the owner of a crisp business, during her usual travel to China, she found a booming market for her banana crisp venture.
The idea of exporting Cameroonian crisps to China came as I was traveling back and forth between China and Cameroon, picking up goods in China for resale in my country. I discovered Chinese crisps and realized they weren't made in the same way as ours.
She sends parcels of crisps to China 4 times a year through a partnership of friends who also ship their produce to China. While her products are in high demand, she says as a small-scale trader, it's easier to ship the goods together and share the export costs.
Doing it on my own was really tough. I found friends who are also doing business with China, and I thought, why not send consolidated parcels? They receive them and in turn sell them on the Chinese market. The idea worked out well because there are plenty of people handling the parcels, so we end up sending them at least 3 or 4 times a year. It's a lot of work, but the goods sell very well.
Yolande says China's zero-tariff policy, set to take effect on 1st of May, could make the shipment process less costly and more straightforward. The policy, announced in February, grants duty-free access to exports from 53 African countries that maintain diplomatic relations with China. And Cameroon is one of them. Analysts say the policy is a chance for Cameroon to strengthen bilateral trade and investment with China.
With the new measure to eliminate customs duties on Cameroonian products exported to China, this trend is likely to increase significantly. We believe that by 2027, Cameroon could become one of China's most important partners in Central Africa, and China could become Cameroon's leading partner. So a competitive dynamic is emerging because Cameroonian products stand to benefit from entering the Chinese market, although they must be granted a certain level of added value to qualify for preferential treatment.
And with Cameroon hosting trade ministers for the World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference, analysts say the gathering is a chance for China to also expand its investment in Africa, particularly in Cameroon.
As major importers of food products, the Chinese have two options: to invest in factories in Africa using local women to export goods to China, or to invest in Africa using local women to export goods within Africa to take advantage of the preferential tariffs offered by the Continental Free Trade Area. So it is in the Chinese interest not to only engage with Africa, but also to take advantage of the Continental Free Trade Area and to use the WTO meeting taking place in Cameroon to increase B2B trade and strengthen ties with African partners.
By 2024, China had become Cameroon's second largest trading partner, accounting for 16% of Cameroonian exports, worth $943 million. Cameroon mainly exports crude oil, timber and agricultural products, particularly cocoa and cotton, to China. And with duty-free access to the Chinese market, Cameroon stands to grow its local processing and improve growth. Caroline B., CGTN.
Time now for our business segment. Here are the headlines. The World Bank pledges aid for developing countries facing economic fallout from the Middle East conflict. And Ghana returns to the bond market 3 years after debt restructuring.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara.
No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome into our business segment. The World Bank Group says it will support client governments as they deal with challenges caused by the Middle East's conflict, including increases in energy costs, by leveraging fast dispersing policy financing instruments. The development lender said it was ready to respond at a scale with immediate financial relief, policy expertise, and private sector support to preserve jobs and growth in affected countries. The World Bank has also used fast dispersing policy development lending facilities to speed hundreds of billions of dollars in relief to developing countries affected by the pandemic in exchange for progress from governments on meeting certain reform targets. The World Bank said it was keeping in direct contact with client countries most affected by the Middle East conflict. People in the U.S. have been feeling the pain at the pump for weeks now, and as the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran continues to disrupt strategic oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. Fuel prices have spiked, driving up transport, airfares, and shipping costs, expenses that could soon start showing up in everything from groceries to utility bills. Economists warn that if the conflict drags on, higher energy prices could fuel broader inflation, squeezing household budgets and slowing spending across the U.S. economy. Tony Waterman reports from Washington, D.C.
Paul Shields watches his pennies. The Army veteran is on a fixed income, and the recent spike in gas prices is eating into his budget.
It's horrible. I fill up like around a half a tank. For this car, it may cost me like $27. I just spent $40, so that's a huge jump.
Prices at the pump have surged nearly 35% since the conflict in Iran began, putting fresh pressure on households already strained by an affordability crisis. And some Americans are now worried that gas is just the first pain point.
It seems like everything kind of follows the fuel. You know, once the fuel goes up for everything, airline, cabs, Uber, your personal vehicle, tractor trailers, diesel is high. So once the prices go up on automotive or automobiles or transportation, then everything seems to tank and follow.
Groceries could be next, hit by the triple threat of soaring costs of fuel, fertilizer, and freight, all linked to Iran's stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz. Fresh produce, meat, dairy, and seafood are expected to see the fastest price spikes due to their reliance on temperature-controlled, fuel-intensive logistics. Iranian strikes on natural gas facilities could also drive utility prices higher, with the U.S. getting more than 40% of its electricity needs from natural gas.
That will put a drag on consumer pocketbooks, consumer spending. It will actually delay certain expenditures. And so what that means, the U.S. could see a recession. It would likely be a relatively mild recession if it does happen. But certainly you won't see a boom as a result of what's going on in the United States.
The Trump administration is trying to offset rising prices by easing oil sanctions on Russia and Iran, temporarily allowing foreign flag ships carrying oil at U.S. ports and tapping into the U.S. oil reserve. Experts say the only thing that will drive prices lower is a ceasefire. But even then, it will take months for things to return to normal.
Between the infrastructure damage, the uncertainty in the region, we see it's going to be hard to get to a path back to $60 per day. We see a floor at around $70 to $80 per barrel.
For how long?
For at least the next 6 to 12 months.
Which means the higher prices Americans are paying for everyday essentials could remain elevated well into next year. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Washington.
Kenya's President William Ruto and Mozambican President Daniel Chapo have agreed to deepen cooperation on energy, security, and trade during bilateral talks at State House in Nairobi. Ruto said Mozambique's large natural gas resources could help stabilize regional energy supplies and reduce the impact of global and regional disruptions on supply chains, noting the logistical advantage between the two countries' ports. Chapo said security cooperation had helped Mozambique address an insurgency in the northern province of Cabo Delgado, which has disrupted gas projects and displaced thousands of people. He credited support from regional partners, including Kenya, for improvements in the security situation.
The discussions we've had on the opportunities of gas in Mozambique will go also a long way in mitigating the effects of the conflicts that you have on our supply chain. The distance between Beira and Mombasa is just 24 hours. So that if we could unlock the gas potential in Mozambique, it would go a long way in making sure that our supply of energy products, including gas, would be much more predictable and much more cost-effective. We are working as a government to see how to mitigate and reduce the effects of the challenge we have in the Middle East. We have also been very clear to our oil marketers and those who have storage capabilities that government of Kenya is not going to entertain any artificial shortages that are meant to benefit profiteers.
With Kenya, we shall keep cooperating in defense and security in a way that the experience of Kenya in the fight against terrorism can also be transmitted to Mozambique as we continue to fight terrorism, which is a global problem. Terrorism is like climate change. It is a global problem that directly or indirectly affects all countries.
Ghana will sell a new 7-year domestic bond 3 years after it suspended mid to longer dated domestic issuance following a debt restructuring. The finance ministry said the bond will have a 7-year maturity and will be marketed from March the 30th, with books closing April the 1st and settlement on April the 7th. The offer is to be marketed to locals and also open to non-resident investors in a test of foreign interest. The ministry said the auction was aimed at supporting liquidity management and refinancing of maturing obligations. It also aims to rebuild a sovereign yield curve and restore market and confidence for retail and institutional investors. The minimum bids were set at $4,575, according to the circular, and the coupon rate will be determined during the process. Millions of road users in South Africa navigate routes filled with potholes. Not only does it make driving stressful, it damages vehicles, causing disruptions along major trade corridors, and it also impacts supply chains. But one Johannesburg motorist, fed up with the state of roads, has come up with a fast, cheap, and easy solution to repair them. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Patchpal, which has been around for just over a year, is already starting to improve road conditions in local communities. It is an engineering innovation that makes road repairs cheaper and faster, a process that would otherwise take months.
So what led us to come up with Patchpal was just frustration. We had been through enough tires and rims that we got to a breaking point where we thought, let's figure something out. Patchpal is a throw-and-go pothole repair solution. We have small bags containing specially engineered cold mix. You throw them into a pothole, drive over it, and the compaction will set the pothole, will set the repair. As traffic continues, the Patchpal will continue to work with traffic to not only fill the gaps, but to compact into the pothole further. It outperformed all the industry benchmarks for traditional cold mix in every single metric. So it doesn't actually crack and allow water in. And when it comes to rutting resistance, essentially you're going to lose 3 mil every 20,000 passes. This one here is about 2 weeks old. And as you can see, the bag is starting to disintegrate. You can see that it's been compacted together. All the little gaps that were there beforehand have all been compacted together.
The pothole problem extends far beyond urban areas. Conditions are even worse in rural towns, where the agricultural and mining industries have to transport goods to ports on subpar roads.
It's so simple to take and fix up potholes, and you give the work to the communities instead of giving it to an outside contractor. You get the community involved, they earn money, and they upgrade their own roads and take care of their infrastructure.
Patchpal is being tested in 3 Johannesburg municipalities and is already attracting interest from other African countries.
We didn't design it with anything other than South Africa in mind. However, since we launched, we've had all the neighboring countries reach out to us, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Botswana, Zambia. So we are trialing it in those regions as well.
As governments grapple with crumbling infrastructure and tight budgets, low-cost scalable solutions like this may just be what they need in the interim. Julie Shire, CGTN, South Africa.
Time now for our sports segment. Here are the headlines. Coming up in sports, transgender athletes banned from the women's events at future Olympics Games.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa. So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. The International Olympic Committee has ruled that only biological female athletes will be eligible to take part in women's category events at the Olympic Games from now on. The ruling reverses a previous policy where transgender athletes were allowed to take part in the Olympics once cleared by their respective federations.